Howdy, folks! Now, I'd like you to participate in something with me. A social experiment, you could say.
Did I tell you about coming away from me?
Well, not this kind. Now, pretend as if you're in the year 1985. God damn it, you're one of those visual learner type people. Let me see what I could do. Wall kabam. Take it or leave it, Daddy-o.
So, you're an average American citizen in 1985. Reagan is messing with the economy, the Cold War still rages on, and the war on drugs is only continuing to disproportionately imprison massive amounts of minorities, causing decades of arrest amongst the American population. But you wouldn't know that. You're an American in 1985. I doubt you'd even be able to spell America. But what Americans knew back in 1985 was that video games kinda sucked. It was because of a little tiny thing known as the video game crash in 1983. The video game crash in 1983 was a massive recession in the American video game industry that was spurred on due to a multitude of reasons. Multiple competing home console systems, along with the competing home computer market, inflation, but most importantly, the quality. Or the lack of. This game looks constipated. Now, of course, you have to take into account the limitations of many gaming hardware back then, but geez, this isn't all too appealing to look at, man. Game boxes were the catfish of the video game industry at the time. You'd see this well-done box art and think, this game looks good, and then end up with this. Like, what the hell? I expected only the highest quality smut from Custer's Revenge, not this! In all seriousness, Custer's Revenge is somehow racist and sexist all at the same time, and is rather disgusting to the point even Atari sued the developers, so yeah, grade A garbage. On top of lackluster graphics, many of the games put out were just plain bad. Games were often vague, difficult, or just plain boring. You weren't exactly the life of the party if you happen to like any of these games. I think you get the overall gist of all this context. Video games sucked because the quality wasn't up to par and somehow pornographic Atari games existed. Honestly, either one of those two things would have been enough to cause an American video game crash, but it just had to be both. For 2 years, the shakeup to the industry led many major companies to go bankrupt and resulted in a crash that would take years to fully recover from. But there was a glimmer of hope that came in the form of power.
Now you're playing with power.
While everything was going absolutely wrong in the US of A, over in Japan they were having a blast with their games, especially with the Nintendo Family Computer, or the Famicom. It was doing tremendously in the country to the point that Nintendo was considering releasing the console in America, even despite its fucked status. But Nintendo was well aware of the fact that releasing the system in the US would be difficult, so they had to make sure that everything about their console was tailor-made to appeal to the most consumers at the time, changing its design, enforcing strict third-party standards, and making sure to advertise their games concisely and accurately, but most of all, providing quality games to play. While most of the Nintendo Entertainment System's launch titles now are just serviceable and kinda lame, there was one that absolutely blew up. That game was Super Mario Bros.
Super Mario Brothers. If you're down to the Super Mario Bros, you're a goblin. Now, as strange as it may seem, the exact date of its release is not known. It's known to be released in September of 1985, but the day remains a mystery like how Jimmy Hoffa disappeared. Regardless of when this game released, it's clearly had its impact on the video game industry. At the time, and even now, this game is still one of the highest selling video games of all time, and that's just insane. But just because it did so well long ago doesn't make it great. But that's what I'm for. It's now my job to see whether or not this game truly deserves its classic status, or an ASIC status. Get it? I removed the clause so it sounds like ass. Whatever, let's just go over the story. Do you think there's an actual story in this game?
If you're honestly expecting to find a full-fledged plot in this game, you are sorely mistaken. I'm gonna get this out of the way right now and just say that Mario games have close to no plot at all. Scratch that. Most Mario games don't have a plot at all. The Mario RPGs like the Mario and Luigi series or the Paper Mario games do have plots, and even though they are rather simplistic compared to other games, there is still a story to explore. Mario platform games on the other hand, yeah, no, there is none at all. But, to give credit where credit is due, this game has much more story than you might expect out of it. Apparently in this game, all enemies are part of the Koopa tribe and are rather infamous for their black magic. They send the Mushroom Kingdom into ruin as they turn all the inhabitants of the region into brick block stone and horsehair plants? Oh, like this. Huh. The Princess Peach, or Princess Toadstool in this case, is the only person capable of restoring the Mushroom People back to normal, and she can't really do that when she's currently captured. I mean, you can't really do all too much with Captured, so I understand where she's coming from. The rest from there is pretty much what you'd expect from any Mario game. Beat the bad guy, rescue the princess, and save the day. Standard stuff, so standard that there really isn't a point on dwelling on it any longer. This story is the most Oscar-worthy plot out there, but I don't think it's a deal-breaker by any means. If anything, I think it's probably the best premise for this type of game, especially at the time when telling the story amounted to writing some biscuit sushi in a manual instead of actually detailing the plot within the game itself. And really, who in the blue hell needs a story in their game about a portly plumber jumping for out a fungus-ridden kingdom? Alright? This game by today's standards looks stupid simple, almost too simple. But at the end of the day, I don't think that this game's simplistic graphics deterred the overall product at all. If anything, I think the look of this game only adds to the relatively speedy and mastery-type nature of the gameplay, which I'll get to later. Even if the game's graphics nowadays was declared to be objectively terrible, I don't think it would matter all too much because of the fact that this game's look is iconic to an almost egregious extent. You may not have played this game in a while, or even at all, and you'll still recognize this puny little sprite, probably because of all the merch that Nintendo peddles with it. Speaking of recognizable things, the soundtrack. Trust me, you've heard at least one of these songs, whether it be the original 8-bit tracks or remixes and the like. The actual number of songs in the game itself is quite pathetic when you think about it, but this game has a case of what I'd like to call having quality over quantity. These songs are extremely well made in my opinion, with them fitting in nicely with the levels they're played in. The overall theme is energetic and bouncy, the underground theme is much more mellow and ominous, the underwater theme is slow and nothing to be excited about, and the castle theme is foreboding and menacing. Even the smaller songs like the Game Over theme is dreadful to hear because goddammit I have to start all over again! And that Starman theme effectively makes you feel as if you are on a drug trip. I mentioned the nature of this game already, but I shall reiterate myself for the people in the back. This game is very much a game you play to try and beat in a rush. It's very much a fulfilling feeling to just blaze through a level as fast and as efficiently as possible, and it's on top of the fact that these levels compared to newer Super Mario games are fairly short, so really if you dedicate yourself, you can very well beat this game in a relatively short amount of time. But this game does require dedication because this game very much has a feel that takes a bit of time to adjust to. The controls are simple to grasp and understand since the controller itself is limited in its buttons and functions. You have the D-pad to go in the direction you want to go, the A button to jump, and the B button to perform actions like running and shooting fireballs. Ooh, wait, let me talk about the power-ups real quick. Power-ups! They up your power, obviously. These grant you various abilities throughout the Mario games, but not really here. Like with a lot of things in this game, options are limited, with you only having the Super Mushroom, which increases your size and grants you an extra hit, same with the Fire Flower, but you can spit out fireballs that can act as another way to take out enemies, and the Star, which gives you very short-lived complete invincibility. In this game, once you get a Super Mushroom, you could then get the Fire Flower, but get hit in any one of these forms and you'll revert back to your puny stature, you fucking fool. But what could possibly hurt you in this little world? Goombas, Koopas, Piranhaplats, Buzzy Beetles, Bullbills, Slacktoos, Spinies, Cheep Cheeps, Bloopers, and these goddamn motherfuckers! Hashtag Hammer Bros are over party, we stand Fire Bros. These all have the potential to murder you in cold blood, but luckily you can very well commit homicide against most of these fellows as well with as much as one jump on the head of these goons. Some don't go down for the count instantly, but you could use them to get rid of your other foes, or yourself, and as previously mentioned, you could use fireballs to eliminate specific enemies as well, and with the Star, you could very well conquer a country with that invincibility. But first, you'll have to conquer the physics of this game. This game admittedly feels weird to play at times. It's by no means uncontrollable, but it's certainly a lot clunkier to get used to compared to later games where the process is easier. On top of getting used to your momentum and jumping and overall maneuverability, there's also the fact that you can travel back through earlier parts of the stage. Seems like they took the phrase "don't look back" literally. This game is very much centered on getting a move on and progressing through levels as quickly as possible, and luckily the stages themselves aren't too hard to get through. Most of the levels are solid enough with tight designs, some are stupid easy, some have too much of these fucks, and some are straight up copies of others, but with one or two new things to trick you into thinking, hey, these are different guys! What's there to spoil? All the Bowsers you fight in the earlier castles are just disguised normal enemies. Princess Peach, or Princess Toadstool in this case, is in the last castle. Yeah, I have nothing. There's a new Game Plus mode, before that was officially a thing, where all Goombas turn into Buzzy Beetles and some platforms are less wide than before. There's also multiplayer, where you can take turns. Luigi! Luigi! That's basically it, but despite that, this game has seen multiple remakes and ports, with the two most well-known being Super Mario All-Stars and Super Mario Bros. Deluxe. Super Mario All-Stars was a collection of the first 3 Super Mario Bros. Games and the Lost Levels, which doesn't count. But what makes this collection significant is that all these games were remade from the ground up with modern visuals and sound. For the time when it was released, of course. I think these improvements really do make the original game all the better, with the sole exception of the Goombas, because now they just look a bit phallic. I also think the physics are a lot better to get used to here as well, so I think I could say that this remake can be a solid replacement for the original. But what about Deluxe? Well, it's certainly a version of the original, but I don't think it's better than the original. It has added aesthetics that add a lot more charm to the game, and at the time of its release was the best way to try and play the original game portably, but nowadays has just been made redundant by, well, the original. It also has the issue of a reduced aspect ratio and resolution, so it makes blazing through the stages a lot more complicated. You could adjust the camera to see more accurately, but it doesn't provide a solid fix for this very apparent problem. To be fair to this game, it does also include the Lost Levels, but it shouldn't count, and a multiplayer mode that isn't just swapping whose turn it is. All the charm of the game almost makes the issues in this game tolerable. Well, almost. There's, of course, the multiple re-releases of the game on more modern platforms over the years, like the Game Boy Advance, Wii, Wii U, 3DS, the Nintendo Switch Online service, the NES Classic Edition with no major difference, and the Special Edition version of the game pre-installed in the Japanese Red Wii, where the question mark blocks are changed to have the number 25 because of the game's 25th anniversary. Oh man.
The fact that this game is still being put out to play even to this day is astounding, and truly a testament as to the quality of this game. It's far from being a masterpiece. It has its flaws, of course, but it was one of the games, if not the game, to revitalize the state video games found themselves in. I mean, it's understandable why one of the games before it just amounted to this. And for that, I tip my hat off to this game. I could only aspire to reach the level of respect and honor that this game garners, maybe even being treated like it with improvements made and buckets of charm being constantly added. Fuck, go back, go back!